Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. This is Jesse Liberty from Falafel Software, and this is from web to mobile apps with Xamarin. So I'm hoping you're in the right place. This is going to be kind of a presentation slash lecture, so don't be afraid to ask questions. What we're going to do is, first of all, I think I was supposed to be introduced and I jumped on it too fast. Sorry.
You jumped right in there, yeah. So welcome. My name is Mark Taparauskas. I am a curriculum creator here at Xamarin University and the host for this session. And Jesse already introduced himself, so I don't need to do that. So Jesse, well, actually, no, you didn't do your whole introduction. So Jesse's a certified Xamarin developer and a Xamarin MVP. And so I'm going to do the informal title for the presentation. So it's porting ASP.NET apps to Xamarin and mobile. So there you go. A little bit out of order, but go ahead, take it away, Jesse.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So but I think that sets the tone, which is that this is not a formal presentation. It's somewhat informal. And let me tell you how we're going to handle questions. If your question is immediate and about the code or the information we just covered, then he's going to interrupt and give me that question and I will respond immediately. All the other questions we're going to take at the end of the session, and if there isn't time, I will respond by email. And these slides, I believe this entire process is being recorded, so that will be available, and I will make the slides available by PDF, and we'll figure out what we're doing with the example code. So I have a short introduction with slides, and that begins with the idea, which is very prominent in the industry, that there is a great battle between HTML and native. And it's very important to reframe that debate because both aspects not only have advantages, but can work hand in glove. So let's look at the advantages of HTML. And as you know, HTML offers as its primary benefit for many organizations that they already have expertise in HTML and JavaScript. And so building phone applications allows them to leverage that expertise. Also, HTML is declarative markup, which has advantages over pure code. If nothing else, it's machine readable. And it gives you terrific control over styling your application. It also uses vendor-neutral standards, and that is a huge benefit in going with HTML. However, there are advantages of native. With native, you're going to get the best performance, you're going to get the ability to use platform-specific functionality, which we'll come back to because that's quite important, and you will get the best possible UI experience because you're talking directly to the native platform. And that will give you the best or most accurate look and feel of a platform-specific application. Now, let's be clear, with Xamarin, we're talking about applications that can run on iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, and increasingly on the Mac. Today, we're going to look just at iOS. I have tested this on Android, and it does work equally well. I should note that native applications can be considerably simplified by Xamarin.Forms, which does give you the declarative markup. We won't be looking at forms today, even though it's near and dear to my heart. So what we will be looking at is hybrid applications, which have significant advantages. One obvious advantage is that you can write your HTML content and yet get exposure to and take advantage of device-specific capabilities, and it gives you a path to take your HTML and migrate that to mobile websites, and then it gives you the ability as a stepping stone to move to fully native applications. Many of us find that the ability to share C# and JavaScript and HTML while gaining access to the platform-specific APIs and the native interface is a great combination. So we can start out by writing HTML5 and JavaScript and then bring it in without losing the HTML5 into a Xamarin application. So what do we get when we migrate to a mobile shell around this ASP.NET application? Well, we can start by saying that the biggest advantage is reuse. And what we reuse is the model exactly as it was in your MVC application. So this is a straight port over of the same exact model. We use the views exactly as they are, although we do add one line to the top, but otherwise the CSHTML stays unchanged. And then we look at the controller and pick up its logic, although not its code. You'll be happy to know we are now done with slides, except at the very end where I'll give you some resources. Okay, and you can see that we are in Visual Studio. What I want to do here is quickly point out a number of aspects because we're going to reuse them. So here's our controller. It has a show photos and a show photo details. And the idea is to show photos. The application that we're looking at might be for manipulating your personal photos or for stock photos, but it shows the photos in a very simple way. We kept everything simple for this sample. And so it shows the photos in the controller and has another method, show photo details. Those we can see in the show photos and show photo details CSHTML. So here is show photos, and it's a relatively straightforward HTML page. And you can see that we're using some jQuery mobile. All of this is going to be ported exactly as it is into the Xamarin application. So we have a standard layout, and I will confess to you that what you're going to see today is not as pretty as I'd like, because between the time this was written and today, my CSS has rusted, and so it looks a little bit cruder than I would like. But let's go over what else is going to move. We've seen the controller and the views. Let's take a look at the model. And this again will be brought over exactly as it is. So the model implements iNotify property change, and the model has an ID to identify the individual photo. It has whether or not this is a favorite, and notice that this is an integer, not a Boolean, and that's because we'll be using SQLite, which does not support Boolean, so we'll use 1 for true and 0 for false. We have a string, which is the name. We have a date time, which tells you when the photo was taken, and a location, which tells you where the photo was taken. We then have a bit of a hack. We have a string, which is the photo name on disk. And we will bring that forward as well. So we've looked at the model, we've looked at the view, and we've looked at the controller. We're now going to see how that gets ported over to the phone. And I'm going to take a huge risk. I'm not sure that this is actually in a state to run, but it would be nice to see it. So I'm going to tell it to run this in Chrome. Cross your fingers. There we go. Now, as I said, the layout is not what I want, but here's a series of photographs, and then I can click on one and it brings me to the full photograph and the details. This was taken in Jerusalem on October 1st, 2013. So that's the basic application that we're going to be porting over to the phone. So let's close Visual Studio. And in fact, what we're going to do is shut down the virtual machine because we want those resources back. So let's just take 1 second and shut it down. I hate shutting down Parallels without shutting down my machine, my VM. Okay, so here we are in Xamarin Studio. And what we want to do is to create an application that's going to be a hybrid application, but is going to use and reuse what we've already seen. So the first thing that we want to do is create a new application. And we're going to go, notice that there are a number of options here. We're going to go to App, and we're going to choose Single View App, which gives us a standard iOS PCL, Portable Class Library application. We're now asked for the app name, and you'll forgive me if you can hear that. I need to drink periodically. Medication that I'm taking gives me an incredibly dry mouth. So sorry to impose that on you. The app name can be anything you like. Let's call this Lecture 1. And you'll notice that the identifier is in the standard identifier model for iOS apps when you submit them to the store. So that is com.falafel and then lecture 1, which is the name of the application. And that's pretty standard to do this backwards in this way. We want to use a portable class library, not a shared library. There are advantages to each, but I tend to stay in the PCL. Get a little bit more benefit from that, and I recently read a side-by-side comparison which convinced me that the PCL is where I want to be. So next, we could change the project name, we can change the solution name, we need to find a location to put it. We're going to go ahead and create a solution directory for this new application, and I use Git, but I do it external to the application. You can certainly do it internal to the application. So let's create the application. And it takes us into our application, and you'll notice that we have 4 projects. We have our PCL, which is where we're going to be doing almost all our work, and Android and iOS and tests. Now, to keep things simple, I'm going to actually disable the Android application, unload it, and that will allow us to focus on the iOS without having to worry about any specific issues that come up for Android. The very first thing I want to do now that I have an application is to go ahead to add NuGet to my PCL and iOS. So I'm going to go to Packages, and what I want to add from NuGet is the Razor pieces, Razor support that was built by Joseph Hill, one of the co-founders of Xamarin, that makes what we're going to do much, much simpler. So I'm going to say Packages, Add Package, and then I'm going to look for Xamarin Razor. And we're looking for the starter, which is right here, Portable Razor Starter Pack for Xamarin and Windows. And that has just about everything that we need to get going with the work of integrating our MFC application into our iOS application. And so we're going to say add that package, and that adds that package to our PCL, and it also creates a number of folders and a number of classes that give you a start on building this. And let's remember to go to iOS and do the same thing. So we're going to go to packages, and this runs a lot quicker because we're going to say add package, and it's going to come up as the first because the last thing you added comes up as the first. And so we'll just go ahead and add that package as well. Now, when you do, you're going to get this file conflict, which says that you need to overwrite info plist, and we're going to go ahead and do that because the package makes the necessary changes to the iOS application. So for now, we can close the iOS, and a number of things have been added, as we mentioned, but it's time now to go ahead and get the content that we need. So right now in content, there is just a style.css that was put there by the NuGet package. We need here to put our images and icons. Excuse me. So what we're going to do, normally we would put in the images and find the icons we need and put them all in. We're going to go ahead and cheat and grab those from the desktop. So we'll say add folder, and then on the desktop, where's my desktop? On the desktop, I'm going to go to MVC to X, which is MVC to Xamarin, and go to code and go here and pick up MVC to Xamarin and go to content, and here's my images folder. And you'll notice it's got a number of images and icons, so I can pick all that up at once. And then, yes, I want to include all. So what would you do under these circumstances? Well, you would fill in whatever images you want from your original application. And you can see that I have a number of images, such as Antwerp and various others that we're going to show in the application. Now, the important thing to do here is to expand everything. Click on the first one, come down to the last one, and then right-click and say build action should be embedded resource. We want all of those to be an embedded resource. Now we can close this back up, and that's the content that we want to add. Next, we want to add the model that we used previously. So we're going to go to models, and once again, the NuGet package has already given us a sample, but we want to add the model that we used in the web application. Now, I've already moved that over into the Mac part rather than the Visual Studio part, so we can simply say add files and then go over to our models directory and pick up Photos CS. That's the only one we need, and drop that in and copy it over. Now, Photos CS, you will notice, is precisely the same as what we got from the web application. What I do want to do is change the namespace to what we're using. So that's our namespace. But all of this is precisely the same as what we saw before. Next, we want to add the views. So we're going to go over to views and do the same thing. We're going to pick up the two views that we had over in the web application. So we're going to say add files, come over to the views, and what we want to pick up is show all photos, CSHTML, and show photo detail, CSHTML. Now, show photos is really a duplicate of show all photos, so I'm going to leave that one out and pick up those two and put them into our views folder. Now, these are nearly identical to what was on the web. The only difference is that I've added @inherits portable razor.viewBase. That's the one difference in these files. Otherwise, these files are exactly identical, and they are Razor files. You can see that they have code in them and HTML as well. And of course, you could add JavaScript or anything else that you would normally add to an HTML application. We're ready now to set up the files as part of our porting. And what we do need to do to each of the CS/HTML files is go over to the Properties window, and under Custom Tool, we need to add one thing. So let me drop that in and expand the window so that you can see that. And I will actually, that is not what I want, forgive me. That was whatever was in the clipboard. So we'll take that out and go get what I do want and go over to Custom Tool, set aligning, and we can zoom in on that. Okay, Custom Tool, and we will drop in this one designation, Razor Template Preprocessor. And then we will do the same for our other CS/HTML and come over to Properties, come over to Custom Tool, and drop in the same term. We can now let Properties window be closed, and that is all we have to do for our CHTML files, is to add the inherit line and add that property. Otherwise, these files stay as they are. Let's go over to startup.cs. We have a little bit of work to do there. The first thing is to note that this initializes embedded resources. So let's come down to these 4 lines that the NuGet package put in and also comment it out and uncomment them, because we're going to work with them now. Change your style CSS to whatever you call. Yes, sir.
I got a question. So the question was on the custom tool. Question from Yuri: does Visual Studio recognize the custom tool for Razor? So like, where's that custom tool coming from, and will Visual Studio find it?
It's coming from the designer of the package, and Visual Studio will recognize it, and it ties the CS/HTML to the package that we're using.
So just by adding the package to the project here, that makes that tool available.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you.
Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do, is put in the style. Now, you can see that we're creating a writer, which is a resource writer, to the appropriate assembly. And here we were writing a file, the style.css, but we actually want everything in content. So we're going to say write folder, and then change this to just content. Now, this should work as it is, but I have found that the world is happier if I extend that a little bit. So rather than a simple write folder to content, we're going to add a portable path where we combine the base path with content. There shouldn't be a difference because it should work either way, but I find this to be a little bit safer. All right, in the same file, we have code down here to create the controller. And this is the controller that was provided by the package. We're going to change that, and we're going to say that what we want there instead is photo as a photo controller. And we haven't created our photo controller yet, but we will in just a moment. And that registers our photo controller. And you can register any other controllers that you like. Now here, controller was calling show razor view. We want instead to call show all photos, which will be a method on the controller. So we know that that's coming. So let's go right up to controllers and add a new one. And we're going to call that new one photo controller. So let's go ahead and mark this as photo controller. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to do some dropping in of code rather than writing it in front of you. It's always more exciting when the code is written right in front of you, and it's especially exciting when there's a typo or other mistake, and you get to spend 20 minutes by what I like to call mob debugging. So instead, I'm going to use code that I know works. So the first thing we need are a couple of private member variables. And they are a hybrid web view and data access. And let's mark these private to be explicit. Okay, hybrid web view we can right-click on and resolve with our portable razor. Data access, we cannot do that because, again, that has not been written, but we're going to write that shortly. Our photo controller's constructor is actually going to take two parameters. So I'm going to replace what we have here with the photo controller constructor. And that takes an iHybrid view and one of these data access objects that we don't yet have. And you can see that it assigns the properties to these it assigns the two parameters to these two properties. All right, we're now going to drop in three methods, and I have kept them separate despite a painful desire to refactor these into a single method because I think they're much clearer this way for demo purposes. So the first one is called show all photos. Where'd my constructor go? I see, we've lost the close brace. Okay. The first one is called show all photos, and the idea is that we load the photos through the data access object, which we have not written yet, and we get back what we're calling a list. This false here has to do with whether these are favorites or not. We then call new show all photos, passing in the list and setting model to it, which gives us our template. We create our page by generating a string from the template, and then we tell our web view to go ahead and load that HTML. Show photo details takes an ID and does very much the same thing except loading the photos for the ID. And show favorite photos, you can see clearly should be refactored into show all photos. but it just sends true instead of false, and otherwise it's exactly the same. And true indicates that we want just the favorites. The next thing that we need is a styles folder before we get to our data. So let's go ahead, how am I on time? Pretty good. And add a existing folder, and we'll pick up the styles folder. And in the styles folder, and of course you would add this by hand, not copying it from somewhere else, we have the all the Bootstrap we need if we're using Bootstrap, and jQuery Mobile, because we are using jQuery Mobile attributes, and then we have whatever style files we need, CSS files for styling the program. All right, we are now ready to create our data, and we do that in a couple steps. The first thing to note is that you can use virtually any ORM, any ORM. We're going to use ADO.NET because it's extremely familiar to the .NET world.
What would the build action be for the Bootstrap files and all the files there that we just added?
That's an excellent question, and these would all be embedded. So we're going to say build action embedded resources. Thank you. Okay, so we go to packages, and here we're going to say add a package, and the package that we want is mono.data.sqlite. So I say mono.data.sqlite, and let's see if NuGet is awake today. Doesn't look good. Let's close that and try again. Packages, add packages. And usually this is quite quick. There we go. Mono SQLite plugin for Xamarin, and that's just right. So we'll say OK, add that package, and then we will go down to iOS and go to packages and do the same thing. And it should be the first one that comes up. So we'll add that package. Okay, that's the first thing we need to do. The second thing we need to do is to get a database that has all the information that we want for this application. And we're going to put that in a folder called app data. So I'm going to come down here and say add a new folder, and that's going to be called app data. And in app data, we're going to add a database that I've already created, but I will show you what's in it and a tool that might be helpful to you. So let's add a file and go to data, app data, and pick up stockphoto.sqlite. Now, once again, this file needs also to be embedded. So let's open up app data and click on stock photo, and then say that we want the build action to be embedded resource. So what's in stockphoto.sqlite? Well, let's open up a handy utility called SQLite Browser, which, if I'm not mistaken, is free. And here we can say open database and go to the one that we're working on, current directory, and say open containing folder, and that's going to say lecture 1, which is what we expect, and that's in get project sample projects. Great. So now we can go back to our utility, and say open database, and we know that that's in Git. And we'll go to projects, sample projects, lecture 1, and within lecture 1 we have the lecture 1 folder, and within that we have the app data folder, and there's our database. So we can open that in this tool, and then we can browse the data. And let me make that a little bit bigger with the magnifier. There we go. And you can see that each entry has an ID. It has a name, which will be the display name, a location, where the picture was taken. The photo name is the name of the photo on disk, which in this case is the same name with .jpg, but it could be virtually anything. Then we have the date that the picture was taken, and if it's a favorite, it will be marked 1, and if it's not, it will be marked 0. So that's what's in the database. We can set this aside, although you can also use this to add data, to create your entire database, and so on. So I recommend this tool very highly. It's very easy to use. We're going to go ahead and close it for now. So that's what's in app data. And finally, we need to create a folder called data. And within data, we're going to create a class called data access. And this is essentially going to act as our repository. Now, before I forget, I do need to register the app data folder. So let me go, we'll come back to this in just a moment. Let me go to Startup CS, and here's where we registered our controller, which is not what I remember doing here. I thought we could registered photo controller. Glad that I came back and saw that, because here's where we in fact show photo controller. And we're going to add a registration to our app data folder. So let's go ahead and grab that. And we'll put it here under the content. And you can see it's very much the same thing except using app data. All right, let's return to our data access file. And the purpose of this folder is, of this file I should say, is to interact with the database itself and get the data that we need. The first thing that we have is a constructor. I'll just drop that in. And so here we are setting up some local values to the database itself. Let's add the necessary using statements rather than resolve, but you can do it by simply right-clicking and resolving. And we're going to say that this is lecture 1 dot models, and otherwise these are straightforward. It's link and generic. System.io, we do add PCL storage, and you'll remember that we added this through our NuGet packages. Okay, let's take these braces out. We'll put them back in at the end. We do need a private member variable. of type string called connection string. And that was the connection string down on line 20 right here that had been read because I hadn't put that in yet as okay. So that is our constructor. Let's close that off. And I'm going to drop in load photo because it's a pretty big method, and then we can just look at it together. So here we have load photo, which of course is for loading a single photo. So when you click on a photo, we're going to take you to photo details. Here's what needs to happen from the database. You're given an ID, you make an instance of photo, you make a connection to the database. Here's your select command so that you can get the single photo whose ID we have passed in, and then we get a reader and we read all the data to create a photo object. Now in theory, the reader should be able to just give us an instant object. We shouldn't have to put each of these fields in. I have yet to get that to work, and there is some advantage to taking this field by field. The only other thing that we have in this file is the ability to get all of the photos. And let's plop that in as well. Plop may not be the best choice of words. And what we're seeing with that is that it's very similar to the previous one, only this time we're loading all the folders and we have a Boolean as to whether we want only the favorites. And we set up our connection and we look at that Boolean. And if it is true, we say select from photo where favorite equal 1. If it is not true, then we just say select from photo. In both cases, we say order by name. And then we get the photo and we rebuild the photo as well. I happen to know that for the best display, I want to change the height on my CSHTML file. So let's go to Views, and this I got purely by experimentation, and go to Show Photo Detail. And down here where we have the width and height, believe it or not, what we want to do is make it 82.5% of that size. So we can do that very quickly by calling up the calculator. And we can say for the first one, which is currently 400, we can say 400 times 0.825, and it tells us that it should be 330. So we'll go ahead and change this to 330. And then, I'm sorry, that was the width. And now for the height, which is currently 320, we can say 320 times 0.825, and that tells us that it should be 264. So we'll go ahead and change this to 264. All I'm trying to do here is to modify the width and then keep the height in the same perspective that it was previously. So what have we done? We've moved over this CSHTML file as is and added the line on top and that property. We've done that for both CSHTML files. We moved over the model phone as is, photo as is, and we have moved over the logic of the controllers, of the two methods in the controller. Then we added our data access, which we would have needed in the web. We needed here in order to be able to get the photos. In the web, it uses a data repository. Here, we have support from the Razor library to just use a data access file. Now, cross your fingers, and we'll see if this works as well. Okay, we get to play debugging with Jesse, and that's fine. We're going to take out these and put in one to close the function, and then one to close the class, and one to close the namespace. Let's go to the next, rebuild. And I don't know about you, but this is pretty much standard for me. It never builds on the first time. Unexpected end of file, not surprising. I think we pulled those out. Okay, let's try that again. I do know people who can look at their code and find all their bugs and fix them before they build. Unfortunately, I'm not one, but that went pretty well. No errors, so let's go ahead and run that. Let's see if that is going to solve the problem. That'd be nice if that's all it was. And good catch to whoever said that. Okay, I'm not going to fool around with debugging that. I am going to bring up the other fully cooked version, and this is exactly what we did with whatever bug is in there removed. And so we're going to say run. Come on, you can do it. There we go. And as I said, our CSS is off, but we have the same functionality that we had in the web. And let me point out a few things that we didn't point out in the web, which is that, first of all, we can switch to favorites, and just the ones that were marked favorites come up. We can go back to all photos. We can click on one of the photos and see the photo in full size, and we can also see the location and the date taken. So that is the job of moving from a web application to a Xamarin application. My experience is that it takes between 30 and 45 minutes once you're reasonably comfortable with it, an hour to an hour and a half the first time. So that is pretty quick for moving things into Xamarin. I do have a couple concluding slides, if I can bring them up very quickly for you. There we are, PowerPoint. Okay, let me just slide down to where we want to be. And where we want to be is on what's next. So next is a quick review of MVC to Xamarin Hybrid. In order to do this, there are a couple places where you can pick up the examples and the and see the source to Portable Razor. You can see that github.com/Xamarin/Portable Razor is the original GitHub, and that's probably the most up-to-date. Secondly, we replaced the CSHTML files with just adding that one line in that property. And then we copied over the model classes and replaced them in the Xamarin, but we took the model classes exactly as they are. We created our controllers by either editing or rewriting the original controllers. And we actually, this is no longer necessary, but we did create our database, and we no longer need an interface. So these slides are as much as a week or two old. The package for Razor has been evolving very rapidly and making things a whole lot easier. Resources for further information. Falafel has Falafel University. I love their short name. Falafel University is a year-long live set of training on a variety of topics. There's also Xamarin University, which is entirely focused on Xamarin, also a year long. And then there are a number of blog posts, and in fact my blog posts on Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms and Razor Xamarin is up to something like 50. But these specific listings will take you to getting started with the work that we did today. If you would like to find out more about Xamarin.Forms, I also have a series of resources on that.